Hey friends, welcome to Your Story Matters podcast. My name is Michaela, and I am so happy you're here. My hope for this show is that we experience the power of storytelling and understand that we are the main characters in our story so that we can live as our truly authentic selves. You're in the right place to hear real stories that will challenge, inspire, and encourage you on your personal growth journey. I hope you enjoy. Today on the show is Lynn Lewis. Lynn is a certified grief educator, speaker, author, and the visionary and chief empathy officer of Destined to Thrive Grief Coaching. A respected leader in grief education and coaching, Lynn empowers individuals to navigate life after profound loss with purpose and resilience. Following the death of her son in August 2019, Lynn made a conscious decision. Grief would shape her, but it would not consume her. She openly shares her personal journey through her signature message, I choose to live in the aftermath, inspiring others to embrace self-love, honor their loved ones, and find a path forward. Here is my conversation with Lynn. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am so excited that you are here. I'm happy to be spending time with you on whatever busy day you find yourself living. And I'm excited to be spending time with Miss Lynn Lewis today. We're going to be talking about all of the things as we do. So, Miss Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michaela. I appreciate it.
So let's kick it off by asking, what is your story?
So thank you for asking. So my story for where I am today is that in 2019, my son, my only child, passed away. And early on after his death, I made a declaration really to myself that though this had happened, it was going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. But I was choosing not to be consumed by his death, and that I was still going to live, carry it with me, the grief with me, the love I have for him with me. But I was not going to just basically lay down and die because this had happened. I was choosing to live, to not just live either, but to thrive in the aftermath of his demise. So that was 6.5 years ago. And then to this day, I have been able to do that with the lumps and the bumps and the valleys and the highs. I have been able to do that. And I'm just so grateful for that. And it helps me with my process of grief and grieving. And I am also able to help others because I recognize how lonely and how you feel alone and isolated. And because I do, I believe others do as well. So I choose to do what I do for myself, for the memory of my son, and to help others along the way.
It's so important. Thank you for sharing that. Grief is something that we all experience, and it almost seems like in a therapeutic sense, that's where we seem to really talk about it. That almost seems like the safest space because it's just not part of our day-to-day lingo, if you will. So how can we start normalizing talking about grief? Because as you just said, it goes on with you. It's not one of these things that just happens and we accept and forget about it. It just becomes a part of us. So what would you say to that?
Yes, and that's one of the goals that I have is to normalize. So we, the griever, have to get to the point to be okay with talking about our person. And we also have to be okay with being rejected by persons that are so uncomfortable to talk about them or they don't know what to say. People have often said, well, if I talk about them, if I call, for instance, my son's name is Daniel Brooks Lewis. So if I talk about Daniel, that's going to upset you. And so what we, the griever, I say need to do is to remind people that we have them on our hearts and on our minds always, to different degrees. But so you calling my son's name or talking about him, it may upset me, not in a mad sense of the way, but it may cause me to feel sad. And on the other hand, it may cause me to feel joy. And usually for me personally, it makes me feel joy just to talk about him and to know that somebody else remembers, somebody else has a story. I would say, learn to be okay with talking about your person, but be okay with somebody may not want to talk about it. And if that happens, then find your people that, don't mind you telling the story 50 million times. They've heard it before. They knew, the person, your person, but you want to talk about them. So find your person or your people or your tribe, whatever you want to call it. And that happens a lot, can happen when you choose to do support groups, when you choose to do group therapy, join Facebook groups, and then you can make your own, the people that because you meet other grievers along your journey. So kind of, make that. And what I also like to say, it doesn't always have to be this sad crying session. And sometimes it's not anything about your person. It's just being together with somebody who has an idea, somebody who does understand. So that's what I try to instill in people because that has been very helpful for me.
That's so good. Community is really what we all need
Yes.
for everything
Yes.
in life,
Yes.
especially grief. Because if we aren't going through it, then we know someone who is,
Uh-huh.
and our time will come in a way. Because no one's
Definitely.
exempt from it. Absolutely. And share as much as you would like about this. In August of 2019, what were those feelings, sensations of knowing that your son had passed and just that first aftermath wave of learning about his
So
passing?
so a snippet of the backstory
Yes.
is that my son did not show up for work. He was a professional firefighter. He did not show up for work on Monday, July 29th. And we did not hear from him. We did not know where he was until August 4th. That was a Sunday night. So 6 days later, the authorities showed up at our home to tell us that he had been found deceased. And so that was a shock. I didn't think that would be what happened. I was expecting him to show up either at our home, show up to his friends, to some of our friends that lived closer to the area where he was found or where he was. I did not expect to get the visit from the authorities with that news. So that was total shock. And I remember asking the detective um, over and over, "Are you sure that it's him? Are you sure that it's him?" And every time I asked, he was like, "Yes, because this." And so I said probably 10 times, and I said, "Okay." And because I did not want to call anyone until I knew for certain. And so that was woof. It felt like I imagine an elephant standing on a person's chest, just it took the wind out of me. But I also immediately, in my state of shock, I went into doing, I gotta call this person. Wait, let me get my notebook. I need to write down what you're telling me. And it was 5 people that showed up because it was police, it was fire, it was a chaplain or somebody like that. And so I was writing down everything because I knew I don't know that I knew, but I take notes. So I just had to take notes. And I went into that doing mode and calling, my family. And my husband was already home, but he was just a pile of no good, a mush.
Childhood.
So yeah, and so it ended up that was bad.
Yeah. When those initial waves settle down, what other feelings, sensations, thoughts arise once the okay, it is him has kind of made itself known and settled in, and then there's the planning of a celebration of life or all of that stuff. So that's I am not a parent, so I can only imagine having to go about that as a parent for losing a child. So talk a little bit about that.
The thing with my son is he was died in another state, 5 hours away. So before they could release his body to us, the morticians in that area had to take care of what they do, and then they flew him back to us. and then our mortician had to make sure everything was good. Between the day we found out and the day we were actually able to funeralize him, it was another 9 days. It was from the 4th to the 13th. So, it was just a lot. It was a lot. And if we think about, because I always like to say that grief, are the emotions that we experience after a loss has occurred. And so all of those emotions, the why, the unanswered questions, the what happened, the vacillating between reality and fantasy. It's like, okay, even after I saw his body, it's like, I know it's real, but let me just visit fantasy world so I don't have to admit that it's real. There was all kinds of emotions that went on and sometimes still do. But yeah, and then of course, like you said, the preparation, all of that. And fortunately, we have supportive church families, we have supportive families. So, it wasn't that we had to dig up, so to speak, somebody to do this, that, and the other. We were able to do that. We had the finances available. So that part was not hard, but just the finality. What happened, son? What happened? And I still ask that question, knowing that I'll probably never get the answer, but I just still ask.
Nothing wrong with asking.
Yeah.
We're in the new year, 2026, and so we just have finished New Year's, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. What encouragement do you have for people who are spending another holiday without a loved one? Because that is just so hard.
Yes, for some people it can be extremely hard. And it's because the holidays you hear merriment, it's merry, it's joy, it's love, it's coming together and all of those things, especially in the United States. That's kind of how we do things. And when you don't have your loved one, first of all, it can heighten those emotions. And so, what I suggest to people to do, and I've done it myself, is to kind of take a pause. I say stop, just stop, because we tend to be ruminating. We tend to be, woe is me. We tend to be feeling sorry with all of those things that we're missing, that we want and know that we can never have. So I say stop. Just stop, pause, breathe, and then secondly, try to turn your thoughts from what you don't have, what you missed out on, and turn your thoughts to your loved one. Um, you know, what just think of some of the joyous if there were joyous times, because we know that there is another side of why people miss people and all of that. But if there were joys and good times, try to turn your thoughts to that. Traditions are huge for some people, some families. And I say to people to keep those traditions that still bring you joy. You may have to massage them and then be okay with starting new traditions. However that looks for you, be okay with that. And then I call it reignite or ignite that flame within your belly, that desire. What is it that you used to do that you enjoyed doing, but because of the loss stopped doing, or maybe feel guilty for doing? Just reignite that within yourself. And again, you may have to massage it. It may look a little bit different, but do that. Do that. And once you do, kinda nurture that thing, because we can have a thing, but if we don't take care of it, it's like having a plant. We gotta take care of it, we gotta nurture it. So whatever your thing is, try to nurture it and grow from the experience. What can I get out of this? And a lot of times people, and I say growth and gratitude, and sometimes like what gratitude can come out of this situation. But if we have stopped and kind of turned our thoughts to the good things, you would be surprised how you can grow yourself, how you can look back and say, wow, I made it through. I made it through half of the day without crying. I made it through, I was able to make this dinner or make this cake, or I was able to bake these cookies that they loved. I was able to go see the light show that we did together. So just, things like that you can do. And if it's your very first year or if it's your 21st year, it doesn't matter. You choose what works for you. And the main thing is to do your best to take care of you. Figure out how to take care of you. Such as be okay with saying no, I don't want to go to whatever the event is, or yes, I am going to the cemetery again. Whatever feeds your joy, whatever brings you peace, work on doing that. And keeping in mind that grief is not something that goes away necessarily. Like I said initially, it will pop back up sometimes when you think, okay, I'm good in that area, and boom, it'll rise back to the surface, so to speak. So be okay with that. Be okay with, like, I thought I had gotten past that, but now I'm feeling like I was day one, year one, year 10. I've had several people this season say, my mom has been gone for 10 years, or someone I spoke to, their person had been gone for 20 years, but they're just feeling kind of sad or kind of down, and that's okay. Because the other thing is we loved or we liked that person all of that time. And even if it was a younger person, like a child that's gone, you now are missing, you're grieving what you didn't get to have. You didn't get to see their first grade pictures, their prom, their graduation. So you're still grieving the nevers that you don't have or don't get to have. So just be kind, be gentle to yourself, and you know that you don't compare yourself, that you are your number one priority, and do your best to take care of you unapologetically.
Yes, so good, Miss Lynn. Since 2019, how did the idea start coming to you of I want to help people along this journey? When did that first kind of be like, this is something I feel called to do?
It actually, 'cause remember I said early on, it actually was only 7 months after his passing that I made that declaration that I was not going to be consumed. And at that time, I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that would entail. I just knew that I had to continue to live. I wanted to continue to live. And I just began doing some research, like what can I do? What can I do for myself? What's out there. I had done the group support, and I had an independent therapist. Like, I wanted more. I want to do more. There is something more that I want, something more that I need. And just doing research, I found on the internet, I found grief coaching. I never heard of grief coaching before. And I dug a little bit deeper, and I found a certification program that it kind of spoke to what I wanted, what I was desiring in my heart, and did the certification. I think I completed that in December of 2021, thinking, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to help people. I'm ready to, and I wasn't. So it probably took another 6 months before I, kind of got myself to a position, and I didn't push it. I didn't feel bad about it. I talked to my counselor about it. And so it was a mid 22, I think it was. And then I had some health issues, some challenges along the way that I had to deal with. And so I've been now doing this like podcast interviews and regularly for probably 2.5 years now, and just speaking and doing some workshops. So 2.5 to 3 years, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, but it took me that long to get my act together. And some days it's still not together. But what I will say to your listening audience is be okay with that. You can start over how often, ever often you need to start over. You can pivot. I had to do some pivots along the way. And one thing that came to mind just this year, actually, I co-wrote an anthology. And so we were doing like a live kind of showcase where all of the authors it was maybe 4 or 5 of us that did the showcase, and so we had to read an excerpt from our own chapter. And one of the excerpts that I read said from my own said that I was grieving and growing simultaneously. I didn't even remember that I had written that, because when
Mm.
you do publish books, you have to, have the chapter done like 3 months before it actually comes out. But several people honed in on that when I talked about that. And then as I thought about it, I said, I've been doing this all along. I'm still grieving, and probably to some extent will always grieve the death of my son. But I'm growing and I can see measurements of that growth. So I say to your audience, your growing does not in any way demean or diminish your person or your relationship you have with your person at all. And this I heard just this week actually, if you want to think of grief as a gift, because, and it's a kind of backwards way of looking at it, but if you are able to grieve, that means that you love that, because, grief, loss is that thing or that person that we no longer have access to. And so if we can grieve that, that was something or somebody important to us that we love, that we appreciated, that we miss. So, you may be able to look at it as, wow, this is a gift. It's not an easy one to unwrap, but it's a gift nevertheless. And so it does come with like opening a gift box. Sometimes you don't have any idea what's in it. And that's how grief is. Sometimes you open that thing up and it's just, happy and positive and good energy, and just you see the blessings and the gratefulness, and then sometimes you look at it and it's like it's ugly, it just ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to keep going. I really like that, grieving and growing. I've never heard that
Yeah.
said before, and I think that's just a beautiful image of so much of life is both and. There are so many
Yes.
things that coexist at the same time, right?
Mhm.
And grieving and growing is one of them. And I love the declaration. And I wanna pull it up from your bio. I choose to live in the aftermath. And that's so true, right? We have to keep, if we also have the desire to keep going, we have to honor that too. Because there's a
Yes.
lot of people
Yeah.
to be helped in ourselves too. So I have two questions. I'll start with the first. Was there anything in your grief coaching learning experience, and even post that, that surprised you about grief, of how we do it, what we might be missing, the gifts even of learning that grieving is a gift?
Hmm. It's a good question. Let me think for
Please.
just a second if I as I play my tape back. One of the things that comes to mind is, I mean, I had other persons to pass away along my life, my mother when I was an older teenager, the other people along the way, friends, in-laws, but this my son's death was the most detrimental. And so until that time, I did not realize how grief avoidant our society is. I did not realize until going through the training the things that we say that mean well, but they're not helpful. And so the training has helped me tremendously to know how to respond to those things when they are said, how it's not appropriate to say certain things. So that really came out of it. And just to also be reminded that it's not something that you get over. You don't get over it. You learn to live with and learn to move with. I use the analogy a lot of times, Michaela, the tennis ball in the jar. So if you put a
Mm.
tennis ball in like a pint-sized jar, there's not a lot of room. You put it in a quart-sized jar, there is more space. In the gallon jar, it's, even more space. And so the tennis ball representing the grief or the loss did not change. It was that we learn how to live with it, how to carry it along with us, how to begin to add other things back to our lives or to our lives as we go along. I call it the grief journey. And the other
That's
thing
good.
I wanted to say too before I forget is you mentioned the title that I use, my choosing to live in the aftermath. It's a choice. And I practice and I preach and I teach that I don't judge persons who don't choose to move forward. They don't choose to thrive in the aftermath. I don't judge them. That's how they choose to do life. It's just me. I choose to do differently because I recognize that whether I sit in the car in the garage or whether I get in the car and drive away, my son is never coming back. I'm dealing with this whether again I'm sitting still in the car in the garage or whether I'm going on a trip, going on an adventure. And I'm choosing to go on that adventure. But
Yeah,
I don't
that's so
judge
good.
people who choose not to. I encourage them, but I don't judge them if that's not what they choose to do.
Yeah, and it does seem to like every loss has a different impact. And I think that
Definitely.
coincides with like what age you are, who that person was, if they were constant in your life versus a relative or family friend that, you haven't seen in X amount of years. So I think all of that doesn't diminish the loss, but kind of just affects differently and how the aftermath is
Definitely, and this is,
important.
it's about my father who he was 91 years of age, and he passed away in August, of 2025. So I'm grieving him differently. Different in that he was ready to go, he had prepared himself, he had prepared us. I'm grieving more his absence. The when I think about picking up the phone to call him or waiting or if my phone rings around a time that he would call or would have called to say, "Hey, I'm in the house," I'm missing that.
Yeah.
But and then he used to text us every day, sometimes twice a day. So for the first couple of months, it was if a text came in early in the morning or, around 7 at night it was like, it's not him. And so I'm grieving his death differently, but nevertheless, I'm grieving his death
Yeah.
because I no longer have access to my pops.
Yes.
So, that
Yes.
again, I'll say to your listening audience is, as you just said, it depends on who it is, your relationship. And another thing is the lack of relationship, that people grieve that because they may be sorry for what they didn't do or what they didn't say or what they said. So it's a process. It's personal. Grieving is like your own personal DNA. Everybody's is slightly different, And then I'll say to your audience, as you move forward, you and someone like a husband and wife or um, it may not even be husband and wife, but two parents of the same child, siblings of the same sibling or parent. Give each other grace because, again, everybody had a slightly different relationship with that person, and we all grieve differently. Just because you don't see someone crying doesn't mean they're not grieving. Just because they don't talk about the person doesn't mean that they didn't care. On the flip side, if it's 3 years later, I should say X number of years later, and somebody's still crying about mom or dad or sissy or brother, give them grace. That's how they are handling it. And I think if we can talk about that, that would help so much, so much.
And that's a really good picture to paint of whether it's a parent or sibling, just to continue with that example, everyone will have a different experience of that person and that
Yes,
affects grief. I think that's a very important thing to say because some people are more teary eyed about expressing that. Others kind of do anger or just questioning or stuff like that. So I think that's very, very important that the
yes,
same person, all of us, is going to be a different lens with which we view their loss and how that impacts it. That's
exactly.
very, very important. So then how have the last 6 years been for you and your self-care? What have you found that brings you joy in the midst of grieving and growing and continuing to do life?
Good question. So I had before this happened, I had already tried to make myself a priority, excuse me, for to myself. But after this happened, I really discovered how you can let yourself go because you kind of get tied up in again, what do I do now? What happened? Why did it happen? Why me? All of the things and especially in the earlier time if you're preparing for this, that, and the other, because there are a lot of dynamics. My son was single with no children, but there were still things that his dad and I had to take care of. And I had already retired from my two jobs. So I did most of that, the phone calls, the taking care of the account, all of that. And so if you add on, if there is, children, if they're home, if there's an estate, then that's extra stuff that has to be taken care of. And so you can lose yourself in doing those things. And so for me, I just found myself losing myself in taking care of his things along with the dealing with the emotions. And so I just began to think about, what? He's not coming back. You're worthy. You're worthy of loving on yourself. You are worthy of making your well being, your holistic well being a priority. That not just going to get a pedicure or a facial, but yeah, but, really taking care of yourself, thinking about yourself, not in a boastful way, not in an arrogant way, but just saying, I'm gonna love on me like I love on others, like and so that's how it's helped me. I've developed a workshop called the ABCs of Self-Love, and it's really the acronym, the ABC alphabet the acronym using all of the 26 alphabets. But the other part is knowing when to step back. As a griever and as an educator, I had to learn the hard way to know when to take a break from grief. I mentioned early on in our conversation that I had done a lot of podcasts last year in 25. And so now I know, don't do, you don't have to do two a week you can do what you can schedule them how it feels to you. Same thing with workshops or, with speaking. You don't have to do it all in 1 week or 1 day or 1 month. Just, t- take care of you. And that has really been beneficial to me in helping myself and just loving on me. And one of the main things is so my son and I, we would, whenever we had time together, whether it was to go to the coffee shop, to the tea shop, to the bookstore, whatever it was, we always called it adventures. And he would say,
Mm,
Ma, I enjoyed our adventure today. Our last adventure was a book fair that's like 2 hours from where I live, and that was our last adventure together, and he'll say, "I enjoyed our adventure today," and so I try to do adventures. I do things that I would have done with him, sometimes by myself, but and again, it doesn't have to be anything huge. It can be just something simple, but it's like, "Well, he would have enjoyed this. He would have
yeah,
enjoyed this."
that's so good. Keeping that memory alive
Yeah.
and always remembering the person. I think that sometimes can trip people up where if they're gone, like, there's no more speaking their name or anything like that. Like, just because they're gone, like, they were still here. Like, they were still a
Oh,
person. They still lived a life. They had people who loved them and cared about them. So I really enjoy that doing things as you're able to, if you can handle that,
right.
to kinda get into that rhythm of still honoring them and loving yourself and doing those joint activities, I think is very helpful.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yes.
I often say that I choose to live in the light of his life and not in the darkness of his death because
Yeah.
that can keep you ruminating and kind of stuck in a space. But I choose to live not trying to forget, not trying to act like it didn't happen or whatever, but just choosing to live in the light because he did bring a lot of smiles to a lot of people's faces. And despite being his mother, being his parents, of course, there was discipline, there were disagreements. One thing that I always told him is like, son, I may not agree with what you do or what you do, because he never said anything. He wasn't the I hate you, that kind of child. He probably thought it, but he never said it. So, but I always said, I may not agree with you, but I still want you to be able to talk, to tell me, to tell us what's on your mind. And I may not agree, but know that you are still loved despite that. So yeah, that
Absolutely.
was, but yeah, living in their light again, turning your thoughts from stopping putting all your energy in the death and trying to turn your thoughts to, okay, something good.
Mm.
What's something positive? Very helpful.
It is, absolutely. So I want to end our time here a little bit. So I'll ask you the question I told you I was going to ask you, and then I want to talk about tea for a little bit because I think
Yeah,
that's wonderful. We're going to be here for a whole day. I cancel your plans. No, I think that in talking about simple things, right? We'll get to that in a second, but as we're entering this new year, 2026, which I just can't even believe
right.
that it is here. Where has time gone? How do you see your story unfolding? What is your next chapter?
Good question, good question. So, and my chapter is unfolding. I already did some planning before we got to 2026 with my business coach, and so I see me being connecting, doing collaborations with businesses, and even looking to partner with or collaborate with businesses who are looking for someone to help in their health and in their wellness. It could be a corporation that's doing a wellness day for their employees. Because one of the other things that I do and I really want to do more of is I talk loss, grief, and entrepreneurship. So reaching the more small businesses or small business owners, solo business owners, to help them have plans in place. Because as you mentioned early on, loss is gonna touch down in all of our lives. And so if we kinda have some plans, especially as a business owner, and especially as a small business owner, because you don't have the HR department, you don't have some of the things that corporations have. So working more with more of them, and speaking of corporations, connecting with corporations, like I said, to be available to see how I can help them with their teams or with their units, just to make this grief talk normal. As you may or may not know, in corporate, usually you get 3 days for a funeral. Regardless of who it is, they give you 3 days. Well, that's hardly enough time for you to breathe.
Yeah,
So, and then,
yeah.
you go back to work, and then, your coworkers, people that you've sat beside, that you worked with, whether it's, a month or whether it's a number of years, then it's like, okay, what do we do? What do we say? And so just to kind of help people to have a blueprint for things like that,
And that is
and to
beautiful.
do more writing.
So needed. So
Yes.
needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Because life does
yeah.
go on, but yeah, 3 days is nothing at all.
No. Yeah.
Nothing at
So,
all. That's so good. Thank you for that. So, backtracking ever so slightly, self love, self care in dealing with loss, even just, and I'll say boosting yourself up and just I'm worthy of this. It is really the simple things in life. And there's nothing that I love more than having a cup of tea. I think there's something so almost spiritual and impactful. Some people are like, take a walk in the woods. Some people are listening to music. I do all of those things. And there's something about a very warm beverage that I think can be added into that list. So without, again, talking about it all day, because I'm sure we could, what kind of solace has tea provided for you for however
so
long that you've been drinking it?
Yeah, I don't even remember exactly when I became an enthusiast or what led me to that. I even asked my best tea friend, "When did we get to be She said, "I don't know. We just always enjoy tea." But it is like a comfort. Sometimes it's a comfort. And again, that's something that Daniel and I did. He likes tea. I turned him on to that long, long, long ago. when he was a child, and he would make me. I found some little cards that he had made me for, to have a cup of tea with him whenever I wanted to. So that was touching. But yeah, it does. It's something about the warmth. It's something, whether it's in a little teacup and a saucer, or whether it's in a 24-ounce cup. It's something about the warmth. And I don't know if whether I still even have it in my bio, but at one point I said, enjoy having a cup of tea with a friend, or a colleague, or someone that I just met. But I never expected that it would be a cup of tea over talking about my son's demise. But it's still a part of who I am. It was a part of who he was. So yeah, it's warming.
Love it. Do you have a favorite flavor or something that you always kind of stick with?
I don't have a favorite flavor, but I love ginger. Like, I enjoy ginger. And then in the area where I live, and it's probably all over, but there is something called Richmond Blend. And so it's kind of spicy and kind of, so if you think about, some people would say it's probably like Christmas in a cup.
Yeah.
Those,
Yeah.
but that's one of my favorites because it's got like cinnamon and ginger, and it's just good. But I
That's
like
right.
ginger. I'm really getting to like chamomile now. I never really liked chamomile, but I like that now, especially for the end of the day. But I'll try
Absolutely.
them all. I try loose teas, I try tea bags, herbal teas, cold, or especially in the summertime. Now, my favorite for the summertime and the cold is
Yes.
hibiscus. That is so
Yes.
good.
There's something about that it's fine hot, but as soon as you ice it, I agree.
Yes.
Nice hibiscus tea
Yes.
in the summer goes so that's like some people do sweet tea, and I'm not a sweet tea person, but I'll ice hibiscus, and that'll be my, like, sweet tea
Mhm. And
substitute.
sometimes when I remember, especially if I make a bigger container, I will freeze it and make, the ice cubes, and that way you pour it over. It's so good. So, yeah. And
I
tea
love it.
shops, I have one favorite right now in the area, but, I enjoy visiting tea room.
Yes. Well, maybe we can do a tea room together one day, Miss Lynn. I think that
Okay,
sounds wonderful.
okay.
I actually used to work at one, and it was just a joy to see people come in from all walks of life, and Christmas time especially was a very big in traditions of, like,
Yeah.
grandmothers bringing in their granddaughters for years and years, just the smells again. I think something that tea does, or just, I guess, the experience of having a cup of tea is it's one of the things that really makes you present on purpose.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that is something that in this busy day and age when we're just like, "Oh, someone's gone, get over it," or "This happened, like someone said something, too bad, so sad." But there is something very grounding about just
Yes.
sitting down, having a cup of tea, and yeah, just being. So I think that's also one of my favorite things too, because it's like it does teach you to kind of stop and smell the roses, and that's important because there's so many things that do pass by very quickly. Either life just does it or we also let it. And it's just stopping and taking a warm sip, and that's sometimes what's needed. So one sip at
I
a time for
agree.
self-care. I think we can make something from that.
Yes, I agree with you. And being present is a big thing for me too, because we just, like you said, we just move, but just that being present and truly just inhaling, enjoying a sip of tea. And especially if you're in a tea room and you're having the proper tea. So you got your tier of goodies, and you're trying a different tea. So yes, I love
It's
it.
a wonderful, wonderful experience. Lynn, thank you so much for your time today and sharing a story that you didn't expect you'd ever have to tell. But I thank you. Thank you so
You're
much for doing
welcome.
it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime, come on back.
Thanks for listening. I invite you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, give it a rating, and review while you're at it. It really goes a long way. And check out the show notes for all the ways to stay connected with me and our guests. Until the next episode.